Before we ever lay our eyes on Sancho in Dragon Quest V, the game sets up his absence as its own theme of characterization. We've got a lot to discuss regarding his absence, not from the story but from us, the player, and how small screen time does not imply no importance. Frankly, his lack of presence also means we are lacking evidence. However, the absence of evidence does not imply the evidence of absence, so there's things that we don't know in the game, and there's things that we don't know that we don't know.
What?
Say what again?
And all the best media in the world utilizes the thematic structure of characters with little screen time who often change the plot entirely. It is that exact absence to the viewer that makes Sancho so shocking. And that's completely intentional in order to express Sancho's core beliefs. So in order to accurately show you this, we need to see what people actually miss when they decide to forget about him just because he isn't the hero. But that's silly, because after this video, you'll realize he is the hero to the hero. And to prove this, we are splitting this video into two distinct parts. First, we will re-examine Sancho's entire journey, tracing the quiet footprints he leaves behind while the world focuses on the chosen heroes. Then, in the final section of this video, we will pull back the curtain for a complete thematic thesis on his character, revealing how his literal absence shapes the core philosophy of Dragon Quest V. Let's begin. Sancho was a close, loyal attendant and dear friend to King Pancraz, and there was a day where the hero was born. Unfortunately, he experienced unforeseen horrors. His best friend's wife, the Queen, was kidnapped on the day of their child's birth. The king was enraged and set forward immediately to search for his lost queen. However, their newborn son would cry each time the king stepped away. There was no choice. The king would travel the world taking his newborn son with him, and he would need support from the one man he trusted more than anyone else in the entire world. And that man is Sancho. Pancraz would have to hide his royal status on this great journey, and Sancho would follow his friend closely. They found a cozy riverside town called Willbrook and set up a home. They made a reputation for themselves being friendly, kind and reliable people. The town grew an affection for Sancho and Pancraz. One day, Pancraz had ventured on a short journey with his son, in search of somebody called the legendary hero, and Sancho stayed behind in their cozy new home. Sancho was worried. Each day he eagerly awaited his dear friend Pancraz and his little master to return. He waited day and night for many moons, until one day they had returned and Sancho was delighted. He enjoyed watching the little master play with his friend Bianca and appreciated the lively company of Pancraz and other friends. He enjoyed his many days in Willbrook and he helped the king search for his wife. One day, Pancraz was summoned to Castle Coburg to attend to the king on urgent business since children have been kidnapped recently. Pancraz and his son set off alone to Coburg. It was a simple summon request and not a very far journey. They would be back shortly, and Sancho waited in Willbrook for their return. He waited and waited and waited. He began to get worried and went to Coburg to find them, but when he arrived, they weren't there. So he returned home and waited a little too long. Many days had passed until he heard any news, until one terrifying day, the Knights of Coburg invaded this quiet, humble town of Willbrook. Pancraz had been charged guilty for Prince Harry's abduction. However, Pancraz had gone missing. His punishment would then be conflicted onto his home. The knights, paired with monster mercenaries, had entirely ravaged Willbrook. Every home, every child, every woman, and every living thing, barely anyone had escaped. Sancho made it out in time, but he had to watch his home burn to a crisp. He forever wondered each day what could have possibly happened to Pancraz and the Little Master. Whether they made it out alive, where are they, what are they doing, are they safe? The thoughts were endless. Sancho believed he was the sole survivor of Willbrook and the guilt overran him. He couldn't live like this, he couldn't be alone anymore, so he returned to the one place that he could call home. He returned to Castle Gotha. It was a long journey for Sancho to embark upon alone and took years. However, when he returned a different man than the one who left. He left as a young man committed to help his friend and find his lost wife. And he left to help raise a little boy to grow into a strong, bright, intelligent young man. But he returned feeling like a failure, feeling guilt that he could have done more to protect them. He basked in depression of survivor's guilt, a curse he could not escape. For he had lost everything and everyone he ever loved. All he had left was a kingdom with no king. 11 years had passed. Sancho had entered his 30s and began settling down in his home within the walls of Gotha. He had a portrait of his lifelong friend and his son atop the fireplace. Each day he remembered them. Since he had not seen nor heard a word from the two since before that awful day, he had finally faced the harsh reality, the truth he did not want to admit. They were dead. He faced that guilt for 11 long years and was prepared to face it for the rest of his life. He had simply failed. One day, a strange man and his wife visited the kingdom of Gotha. They visited Sancho's small home without saying a word. Sancho stared at this man and was in complete disbelief. He knew what he was seeing but couldn't believe his eyes. He looked at this man's face closely. He looked so much like his father. The little master grew up. He became a strong macho man just like his father was, and the beautiful girl standing next to him was the little Bianca. He remembers when they used to play together as children, and now they're married. Sancho wheezes and sobs. This joyous news was too much. He felt like he was dreaming. He immediately takes the hero to see Prince Albert, who was Pancraz's little brother ruling over the country while he was missing. However, during the meeting, Sancho watches Bianca faint. She suddenly fell to the ground, and Sancho, out of everyone, panics here the most. He already could not believe this joy he felt was real. His body was expecting something tragic to occur. Happiness felt unfamiliar to him. Perhaps he felt like he was cursed. Every bad thing that happened around him, he blamed himself. Fortunately, this time, this shock was actually the burden of great news, for Bianca was pregnant. This was single-handedly the greatest day in Sancho's life. He finally felt a sense of peace and love. Part of his guilt had finally faded. He spent time hearing the little master's terrifying stories. The little boy he was tasked with raising had suffered 10 long years as a slave, forced to work each and every day, witnessing inhumane horrors of morality. But the worst part, he was forced to watch his father die in front of his eyes, by the hands of Con the Knight, Slon the Rook, and the Bishop Larger. He was just a 6-year-old boy and saw his father sacrifice his own life to save his son. Sancho could not believe that the little master had to endure so much. He felt responsible for his pain. He was his guardian and he failed his duties. Even through this joyous occasion, Sancho's depression remained. It was not long until Bianca would eventually give birth, but before that the hero would have to embark on the rite of passage to prove his worth to claim his birthright. He would become the king of Gotha. Sancho had spent the remaining months by Bianca's side, aiding her pregnancy, just like he did for Marda nearly 20 years ago. When the hero returned, Bianca was in labour. He eagerly awaited in the throne room with Sancho helping with the delivery. History had repeated itself. Sancho had played the same role for this family across 2 generations, and he was more than happy to play his part. Eventually, Bianca had given birth to not one child, but to twins. Sancho was lifelong friends with Pancraz and became an uncle to the hero, and now he took that same role as uncle to this beautiful little boy and girl. Shortly after, the hero attended his coronation and the kingdom celebrated the return of the rightful king and felt like a kingdom once again. They partied the night away. However, in the stroke of midnight, the drinks were laced and everyone had fallen into a deep sleep, and Queen Bianca was missing. The midwife witnessed it all. Bianca had given her the children to hide away and selflessly took the attention of the invading monsters. They carried Bianca away and kidnapped her. The midwife was told not to come out of hiding until it was absolutely safe. It was many hours later until she was found by the king. Sancho had tried to peacefully approach this situation, but inside was deep panic and guilt. He tried to convince the king to stay level-headed, but his advice was ignored. The king suddenly left without any words and journeyed alone to find his wife, leaving his kids in Sancho's care. Then days turned into months. The seasons passed one after another. The months turned into many years. The king was missing. Sancho had to relive his pain. He first lost his best friend in the whole world, and now he lost his nephew and his nephew's wife. He felt like a complete failure and felt a strange sense of guilt. He had survived so much pain, experienced a lifetime of trauma, lost everyone around him, and yet he was still standing. Each day of the next 8 years, he was overcome by a strong, overbearing sense of survivor's guilt. Any man in his situation would have taken the easy way out. It would have been easier to just end it. But Sancho was placed in a particular situation. He could not abandon the prince and princess. He was their sole guardian. He was their uncle, and he raised them alone for the next 8 years. Fate truly was funny. It was unknowing at first, but Pancraz had deduced that the only way to save his wife Marta would be to find the legendary Xenophian hero. Only he can embark past the gates of Nideria. But what Pancraz did not know is that the legendary hero had not been born yet, and now, many years later, Sancho was holding the legendary Xenophian hero in his arms. He was just a baby, but one day he would have to face Grandmaster Nimzo, who'd been spreading his twisted, pessimistic propaganda across all corners of the world. The followers of light had named themselves as a beacon that can save the world. They spread lies and brought pain upon the world, convincing its inhabitants that Nimzo would save the world. And the scariest part? The world believed it. Sancho realised that the burning of Wheelbrook wasn't just a random act of war, it was a calculated assassination by a cult trying to erase Pancraz's bloodline. This was the effects of the followers of light politically influencing the world one small town at a time. Sancho knew it was his duty to raise this little boy and girl to save the world. He could not leave the world just yet, for he was all these children had. And so, he spent years raising them into competent children. They had heard rumours of lifelike statues being sold off at an auction years ago. He embarked from Gopher to follow this trail, taking the prince and princess with him. After many days, they had acquired the staff of Storos and found the king. At long last, they had found him, petrified into a body of stone. He was cursed to remain conscious in a lifeless body for each day of the last 8 years. The horrors of the king's imagination had occupied his mind and soul. He was forced to watch a rich family raise their newborn son, who was born on the same day as his own children, and the same day he lost his wife. Sancho felt his pain. He couldn't help but feel responsible for each second the king had endured, but they must persist. The princess used the staff of Storos to set her father free, and Sancho saw his master once again. Together, they returned home as a family. Back at Gopher, the full story of what happened that day was revealed. The king had found Bianca and together they fought off Con the Knight. Bianca had unleashed something special. She had the blood of a Xenophian, thought to be wiped from existence. She was the last remaining Xenophian. Larger was in search of her in order to prevent the legendary hero from being born. The kidnapping was just a few hours late. If they were to be earlier, they could have killed Bianca with the children still in her womb and removed the legendary hero from existence. However, knowing he was too late, he decided to petrify the king and queen to wait until the day he could face the chosen hero and kill him before he fully grew. Sancho's degrading body would never be enough to stop him. He watched and supported his family. Sancho had survived a lifetime of trauma, loneliness and suffocating depression. For 30 years he carried the guilt of failures and loss. He had spent his youth failing to protect Pancraz. He had spent his adulthood failing to protect the hero and Bianca, but he would not fail this third generation, his third chance. This family was his entire life. He would do anything to help them find Bianca. The king, now returned from his stone prison, was no longer the helpless boy Sancho once protected. He was a father now. He was leading his children, teaching them to be strong and hardening them for the war ahead. Together, they embarked upon a massive quest to reach Bianca, a quest to find the Xenophian dragon. This was their dragon quest. They climbed the stairway to heaven, only to find the legendary castle Xenophia had fallen from the sky long ago. They dove deep into the earth, finding the ancient Dr. Agon trapped under the sunken ruins. To lift the castle back into the sky, they needed the lost gold orb, forcing the hero to travel back in time to his own childhood to swap it. This was a surreal moment where the hero got to see Sancho in his youth and his father once again. Then, with the castle restored, they conquered the Talon Tower to reclaim the Dragon Orb, finally awakening the true form of the Zenith Dragon. Through this whole adventure, Sancho wasn't the hero slashing swords protecting the party. He was just the supportive, fiercely loyal uncle. He was the anchor holding their spirits together. For the first time in his life, Sancho wasn't sitting by a fireplace waiting for a tragedy to happen. He was actively a part of a group in order to ensure it doesn't happen again. He could not live with his own failures and refuses to make any more. The Zenith Dragon carried them straight to the absolute peak of evil, the temple atop Mount Velez. For Sancho, the absolute cruelty of this place was nothing more than a staggering twist of fate. This was the exact same temple the hero had been forced to build as a slave for 10 long years. The absolute source of his master's childhood trauma that he blamed himself for, and now the cult had Bianca's petrified body at the centre. But this time, they weren't helpless victims. They stormed the temple, but they didn't find the bishop larger. Instead, Queen Thurs, the figurehead charged with spreading the cult's twisted lies and propaganda. Many of the cult's most dedicated followers were present in this now finished temple, praying and worshipping the cult. In a cruel psychological trick, Thurs disguised herself as Marta, the hero's long-lost mother, trying to trick the family into joining the darkness, but they saw right through the lie and beat her down. Forcing their way through the temple, they had found the other figurehead of the cult, King Coral, but after a swift beating, a desperate Coral offered to help the family in exchange for his life. But it was here that Larger materialized from the shadows, incinerated his own ally in a flash of merciless heat, and soon vanished after threatening the hero. With the monsters now gone and the cult's hierarchy collapsing from within, a telepathic voice echoed through the temple. This was Marta, from deep within Nideria. She begged her son not to follow her. She told him to just take his family and live in peace while he still could, and then she told them a surprise was waiting for them upstairs. When they walked up the altar, the stone curse finally shattered. The hero had spent 8 years frozen as a statue, but it had taken an extra 2 years of grueling searching, travelling and fighting until Sancho could finally lead the family to this moment. Bianca had been trapped in that lifeless, conscious body of stone for 10 long years, but now she was human again. After nearly 3 decades of isolation, grief and suffocating depression, Sancho saw his little master reunited with his queen, and the kids finally had their mother. He blamed himself for failing this bloodline, which were now at long last together again. For Sancho, the long fight was finally over. The burden of his guilt could now fade away. His family was saved and his monumental job as their protector was finally complete. However, as depression tends to be, it remains. Sometimes when you think the source of your sadness is gone, the sadness remains for a reason not known to you. Sancho had begun healing, but he was still broken. He had redeemed his failures, but Marta was still missing and the world was still in torment. His final duty was not to his current master, it was to his previous master. Only when Marta is saved will he truly rid himself of his destructive depression. So they ignored the warnings. They gathered the 3 rings needed to open the gate to the terrifying underworld of Nideria. Bianca now took the active fighting role. Sancho's body was reaching its limit and travelled in the wagon for support and backup. For the king, this was about saving their mother. For the son, this was fulfilling his destiny. For Sancho, this wasn't just a battle to save the world, this was his final chance to redeem himself. He wasn't going to sit by another fireplace and wait for people to die anymore. What he did not know is that regardless, this entire journey, he was loved. Despite his mistakes, he was always just a regular human with no extraordinary abilities. But those closest to him were the ones destined by fate, and naturally compared his own standards to theirs. Sancho was never supposed to go this far. Nobody expected him to go this far. He did it out of grief, depression, and self-deprecation. He was trying to redeem himself, but there was nothing to redeem. Nothing was actually his fault. He just blames himself. That's how depression gets you. It poisons you. Deep in Nideria, in the castle of Mount Evil, they found Marta, using her powers to seal the gates of Nideria shut so Nimzo could not break free. She feels pure joy that her own son came to save her. Seeing her once again took Sancho back to the moment where she was captured nearly 30 years ago, to the moment that set this entire domino effect of pain, emotional torture and depression in place. Marta was exhausted. Her magic had been weakening for 3 decades and survived through sheer force of will. But now, her son has arrived to defeat Nimzo. She finally breaks. With her remaining energy, she uses her magic to finally seal Nimzo away for good. But in a shocking twist, Nimzo struck her down with a lightning bolt and Larger appeared before their very eyes. They stood toe-to-toe with Larger one last time. In a flash of righteous fury, the monster who burned Wheelbrook and murdered Pancraz was put down for good. Marder, dying as she speaks, picks herself back up and says her final goodbyes to her son that she couldn't hold, and she summons the spirit of her beloved. She summons Pancraz. His spirit descends from the heavens and they reunite at last, embarking on their afterlife of peace, looking down on their son, knowing he will save the world. It was never said here, but Pancraz seeing Sancho take his son this far and raise his grandchildren would have shed a tear to his eye. He would have been proud to have such a loyal and trustworthy friend. But they pushed forward, confronting Grandmaster Nimzo in his menacing pocket dimension. Together, they destroyed the Dark God and shattered his twisted propaganda forever. The world was finally free. And when the smoke cleared and they returned to the walls of Castle Gopher, a strange, unfamiliar feeling washed over Sancho. It was absolute peace. The king had his queen, the children were safe, the world was at rest, and the ghosts of Pancraz and Marder were finally smiling down on him. The long, 30-year nightmare was officially over. His monumental job as their protector was completely done. Sancho didn't need to carry the weight and burden of the world on his shoulders anymore. He could finally step into the shadows, into a beautiful, well-earned retirement. During the grand coronation party, Sancho says something to you one last time. He says, "My Majesty, to me, you are always my friend. Welcome home. I am so proud of you. I am so happy. When I left this castle with Senor Pancraz so long ago, you were just a little baby. I did not believe this day will ever come. It's like a dream. Everyone is waiting for you. Friend." And in the halls, they celebrate their victory and the game ends. And that is the true tragedy of the most loyal companion ever. RPGs teach us to worship and idealize the chosen heroes who save the world, but the genre's most profound storytelling is found in the characters like Sancho, the ones who don't save the world but survive the unbearable agony of holding it together while the heroes are gone, and often being the lifeline to why those heroes succeeded in the first place. Dragon Quest is filled with these characters, and here's 2 other examples which I've covered before who are thematically and visually very similar to Sancho. Sancho is a regular man who is entangled with the fate of destined legendary heroes. From the very beginning of the story, he had a destiny he wasn't aware of. Without him, nothing in the game would have been put in place. Sancho's trauma came from waiting behind and having those closest to him disappear while he blamed himself. I believe Sancho is the anchor of Dragon Quest V that everyone forgets about due to his absence. He's a normal bystander who represents more than the legendary hero saving the world. He's the regular person that impacts your life the most. Sancho's role isn't just a sidekick, it's a masterclass in emotional storytelling. He suffers the agony of being left behind. Most JRPG characters experience trauma because they are actively fighting on the front lines and lose. Sancho's trauma is completely different. It comes from being forced into a passive role. His absolute loyalty means his only job for decades was to wait at home. He waits for Pancraz to find Marder. He waits while Wheelbrook burns. He waits for the hero to escape slavery. He waits for 8 years while the hero is a statue. However, there's a psychological toll. For an ordinary person, waiting is boring. For a depressed man with survivor's guilt, waiting is a prison where your brain endlessly creates worst-case scenarios. Sancho's loyalty is a tragic anchor. It traps him in a loop of waiting for people who might already be dead. While the game presents a happy reunion when the hero visits Coburg and sees his old friend Prince Harry, Sancho's party chat reveals he completely despises Coburg. Sancho cannot forgive the kingdom that indirectly caused the death of Pancraz and the total destruction of his home. This is the most realistic depiction of trauma in the game, and maybe the series. Even though the hero and Harry share a beautiful forgive and forget brotherhood, Sancho is a broken old man who carries a bitter, lingering resentment. If you take Sancho to Coburg, his text boxes aren't his normal cheerful self. His mask comes off. He complains about the country, he remembers the fires of Willbrook, and he blames them for what happened to Pancraz. It proves his depression isn't generic sadness, it's a hardened, deeply rooted psychological torment scarred from an assassination that ruined his life. Storytelling structures usually demand that a character changes or grows. Sancho is brilliant because he remains completely static, so the family has a safe place to return to. He plays the exact same role for 3 entire generations. To Pancraz, he was the loyal retainer and confidant who gave up his royal gopher status to live in a riverside hut and travel with him. To the hero, he was the loving uncle who took care for him and cheered joyfully through his childhood and sobbed when he returned as a grown man. To the twins, he was the adoptive father figure who kept them alive for 8 years, trained them, and gave them a normal childhood despite a dark god attempting to rule over the world while he searches for their father and mother. Sancho sacrifices his own identity to be the physical manifestation of a home. He is the only constant thing in a world of absolute chaos. He never changes. On paper, Sancho looks like a classic light-hearted big boy comic relief character. He's cheerful, he likes cooking paella, he likes quality time with people, but the writing uses this design to trick you. The game uses his cheerful appearance as a mask. When you unlock party chat in the late game, you realise that his tears, they are the overwhelming overflow of a man suffering from severe clinical depression, hypervigilance, and an intense fear of happiness. And the ultimate proof is when Bianca faints from the pregnancy news, Sancho panics the hardest. His brain is so wired for disaster that his default setting is to assume a tragedy has occurred. Dragon Quest V is famous for being a multi-generational story about a legendary hero. Its reputation is as one of the best JRPGs ever told, and some people even say one of the best stories ever told. But the true heart of this story doesn't belong to the hero. It belongs to his old servant who raised him, to the man who survived 30 years of isolation, absolute loneliness, and a crushing depression just to make sure that when the hero finally came back, he still had a family to come home to. Now, thank you so much for listening to my love for Sancho in this entire video. If you loved it too, consider liking and subscribing and telling me what you think. There's lots of Dragon Quest content available here on my channel, and heaps more coming your way. Consider checking out my other Anatomy of RPG videos. I think you'll enjoy them. And now, I'll see you in another video. Have a great day.